Welcome to Shaped by Faith with your host, Theresa Rowe. To find out more about Shaped by Faith and Theresa Rowe, please visit shapedbyfaith.com or visit the YouTube channel, Facebook, or Instagram. And now, here is Theresa Rowe.
Welcome to Shaped by Faith, where we shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. My guest today is Barbara Sundstrom. She is a writer and producer for the feature film Kentucky Infidel, which is currently in development and pre-production, and Barbara is going to talk about that later in the show. I wanted you to hear about Barbara and her background. She studied screenwriting, how exciting, in UCLA's online professional writing program. Her screenplays won recognition at the Austin Film Festival, World Fest Houston Film Festival, Screencraft Screenplay Competition, and Expo 5 Screenwriting Competition. That's a lot of competitions, Barbara. Her screenplay, Kentucky Infidel, was a semi-finalist for the, do you say KAIROS Prize there?
Yes, KAIROS Prize, yes.
KAIROS Prize from the John Templeton Foundation in Los Angeles. Barbara was a founder and former executive director, and we're going to hear about this too, Crosswind Productions, a nonprofit organization dedicated to mentoring teen, which is so cool, filmmakers while producing dramatic movies that address tough teen issues. That is incredible. As a writer, director, producer, her movies have won numerous awards, including the Adam Award from Sabbath International Film Festival in, Milan, Italy, right? 9 Remy Awards from World Fest Houston International Film Festival, 3 Crown Awards from the International Christian Visual Media Association, Best Short Film at the International Youth Film Festival in Wales, UK, and 2 Telly Awards. Wow, Barbara, that is a lot. I mean, wow, look what God has done with you.
Yes.
It's incredible. I want you to tell our listeners, and I want to hear your background before your writing career began. I know you and I met. It was recently we met at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, Tennessee, and you and I were both waiting to go in there and pitch.
Yes.
You were pitching Kentucky Infidel, and I was pitching my show, Shaped by Faith. So that's where we met, and I felt very connected to you then. And I'm so glad that God did place us together there, because who knows? Who knows what He has in store, right?
Yes. I did also feel it was just a divine connection. It was just a very special moment. I felt like that.
Yes.
When we were together.
Yes, it was. All right. So before you began your writing career, what were you doing? What were you up to?
Well, originally I actually taught teenagers. I was a school teacher many years ago, and then really felt the call to, at that moment, to Christian theater. And here in the where I live in the Houston area, there is a Christian theater called AD Players. Okay. And I was an actress and a playwright and their director of promotion for them there. And so a couple of my children's plays were produced there. And that was that background that began in playwriting. And also had a adaptation that I wrote of a very wonderful children's book called 100 Penny Box that is written by Sharon Bell Mathis. And I did an adaptation of that was produced up in New York City off Broadway. Wow. And so the author, Sharon, and I got to sit there and watch her book come to life on the stage, which was just such a thrill, really, for both of us. And so that was the beginning of the playwriting, and that's how I started out as a playwright. There's a very, I think, interesting story about sometimes the enemy would really like to keep us from certain divine appointments, I think, certain things that he is calling us to. And I didn't think I was a writer because I had a professor read a paper in front of my college class, and she basically, made fun of it, and the class laughed, and it was a very painful experience for me. And I thought, well, I'm not a writer.
Wow.
And
the enemy does do that, doesn't he?
Oh, yes. And for years, it wasn't until later in my adulthood that I was in this class or this organization. And we were doing, I don't know if you ever heard of the Reading is Fundamental RIF program years ago. And I said, well, why don't we do a play? And they said, well, how do we do that? And I said, well, I'll just write a little script, and we'll do it. And so I did, and it was, very successful. And next year they said, Barbara, why don't you write another one? And I said, oh, you can do that. You can write that. And they said, no, we can't. And I said, oh, yes, you can. You just write down what the actors say to each other, what the characters say to each other. You just write it. You write it down. They said, no, Barbara, you don't understand. We can't do that. We don't have that. That's a gift. Oh. And I was like, oh, wow. I thought, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I realized that God had given me that gift of dialogue, that gift of being able to put words into characters' mouths and create the characters. And I just thought everybody could do it. And it, I began to realize that we each have such unique gifts that God has given us. So I was affirmed in that. And that's when I started writing the children's plays that I wrote, and wrote other things as a playwright.
Wow.
And began to see that, yes, God was using the gift that he had given me, and the enemy had attempted to take it away.
That is an incredible story, Barbara. Wow. And look what God has done with you. And the enemy does that. He tries to push us down and squash us. And what better way to use people, your college professor, so everyone can laugh. I mean, wow, how cruel was that? But, we're all accountable to God in how we handle ourselves. And, teachers and professors and coaches, they all have a great responsibility. And that's to mentor their students and to help them, not to make fun of them. So, but God knew his plans for you. So I'm just amazed at what you have done and what you continue to do. I want to ask you, what about your commitment to Christ? When did that begin for you?
I grew up in a Christian home. My grandfather, my great-grandfather were pastors, and my mother was a minister of music. And so I grew up in the church. And because I grew up in a church, in a Christian family, I just thought I inherited Christianity. I just thought, if anyone said, "Are you a Christian?" I'd say, well, yes. My parents are Christian. I'm a Christian. And it wasn't until I grew up in the church. I was in the church, and it wasn't until I really connected and heard the gospel. I'm sure I had heard the gospel, but it was the first time that it really connected with me that this was a personal Savior. This was a Savior that I needed to accept as my personal Savior, and that he died for me, and that he had a plan for my life. And so I think that was was such a turning point for me. And then there have been other times where I realized through God's just very personal provision and connection that He loved me personally, that He died for me. And, I want to encourage, those that are listening, that God is that personal Savior, that Lord that leans down and listens to our prayers, that He collects our tears in a bottle, that He loves us beyond measure.
Absolutely.
And that it was just that whole. It's been a walk of faith all the way through, of just and it's always a daily struggle for us.
Absolutely, yes.
That depending on Him and trusting in Him, but when we do, there's just this incredible peace.
Yes.
That even in the midst of the storm, in the midst of heartbreak and betrayals and whatever may be happening in our lives, that God hears.
He does. Barbara, we're going to have to take a quick break right here, okay? So stay tuned for more Shaped by Faith. We will be right back. Welcome back to Shaped by Faith. We shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. My guest today is an exciting guest. She has done a lot. From Houston, Texas, Barbara Sundstrom. She's a writer, producer for the feature film Kentucky Infidel. She's a director, producer. Her movies have won several awards all over the world. And Barbara, I'm just so thankful that you are my guest today. You're an exciting guest, and you're a world traveler. And there's a difference between, and you were talking about this, between playwriting and screenwriting. So give us a difference, and when did you start writing screenplays?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. This is just really a privilege, and I appreciate it so much. I think just a short definition is that plays are more dialogue driven, and films are more action driven.
Okay.
And so when you have a play, it all, even though there may be different scenes within a play, it is still so much about the dialogue. And certainly there's a lot of dialogue in filmmaking, but there is so much visual, and the visual is so very important. And so when I was moving from, I didn't know I would be a screenwriter until I discovered my great-grandfather's autobiographies. He had two autobiographies. One was Confessions of a Kentucky Infidel, and the other was How I Got Faith. And when I read those as a playwright, I looked at those and I thought, this is not a play, this is a movie. And I thought, I need to tell this story. I want to tell this story. I think it's an important one. It's a story of redemption, a story of salvation. How do I do that? And I thought, well, now, how in the world do you write a screenplay? And so I picked up a copy of the Star Wars screenplay.
Did you really?
I did, and I read it, and I thought, oh, you just write down what they're doing and saying. Well, of course, there's a whole lot more to that than just what they're doing and saying, although that is it. But there's a whole lot to structuring a screenplay, a whole lot to writing visual. And so I began to investigate how to learn to really be a screenwriter. And so I studied, I think that during your intro, you mentioned that I studied on UCLA Online, which they have a whole professional writers thing there. And that was wonderful. Had wonderful working professors, professors in the industry, and learned so much. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, it sounds like you just went for it,
Yes, I did.
Well, since you brought up your great-grandfather's autobiography, let's talk about your screenplay, Kentucky Infidel. You gave me material on that, and it's from the 1870s. I do know that, and I know it's faith-based, and I know it's a drama. So why don't you just start and you just share with us about that, how you got started on that, and anything else you want to share about it?
Well, I can kind of share just like a quick little paragraph about what it's, what it is.
Sure.
It's the heartwarming and gritty true life story of an 1870s future fire holiness preacher, scourged and cursed by his father, who searches through infidelity and alcohol to find his only hope and salvation in the simple prayers of his own young son. It's a story of life, power-packed with touching humor and gripping drama.
Wow.
And so, like I said before, it was from 2 books that I had discovered and read, his autobiographies about his life. And go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask, so you did not know this about your great-grandfather before picking that up and reading that?
No, I had no idea.
Okay.
I was helping my aunt go through her bookshelf. She was going to be moving to assisted living. And I said, Aunt Dot, what are these books? And she said, those are your great-grandfather's autobiographies. And I said, can I have them?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, absolutely. And when I read them, the impact of the story on my life, and also the impact that I thought it would have on those that see it.
Mm-hmm.
The main things were that we're never too far away from God's love. I mean, when he was in alcoholism, he had a daughter out of wedlock. He was the farthest away from what you would say would ever be used by God,
Right.
And then secondly, we're never too lost. No,
That's right.
We're never too far away from that, never too lost, that God can't redeem us. And that there was God's redemptive plan. And I thought about my life because Willis became a Christian and he started preaching. And my grandfather started preaching with him at age 11. And then that filtered down through to me in my life and the faith legacy. And I thought, if someone watching this can start not only faith in their own life, but a legacy of faith through their children and their grandchildren in the future, what a difference that made. So I just thought the story was so important,
It is. And gosh, and the impact that your grandfather also had on his lineage and down the line, and how your great grandfather, like you said, I mean, God redeemed him, and
Right.
Look at the impact on your family alone and what happens when God does redeem us. It changes everything. And because we impact everyone around us, especially our family, whether we want to realize that or not, we do. Barbara, we need to take a really quick break here. And when we come back, I want to hear more about your screenplay. Okay. So everyone stay tuned for more Shaped by Faith. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Shaped by Faith. And my guest today is Barbara Sundstrom. She's writer-producer for the feature film Kentucky Infidel, which we were just talking about. And as we were talking, Barbara, off air, you said that was actually your very first screenplay. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
Yes,
okay.
It was.
Wow. So there was a lot of time in between the time you wrote it and now. So what happened in between?
Yes. Well, I wrote several screenplays after that. You in your intro, you had talked about the different awards that those had received, and so I continued to do screenwriting, and then felt the Lord's call to start Crosswind Productions, the teen film ministry, and I put this very carefully, this screenplay, on the shelf, and said, Lord, I trust you that in your perfect timing that this will come to fruition, that this story is going to be told, and I'm trusting you for that. And really felt called to the film ministry, and worked with the teenagers. I love teenagers, teaching them filmmaking, and we made 10 films that they weren't student films. I always worked with professionals who would mentor the teens, but the teens were part of the crew and part of the cast. And so they learned in hands-on under the direction of professionals.
Where were you when I was in high school? Loved that.
Do you know one of our teens is starring in Hamilton out in LA?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow. It's so exciting. Just, wow. It's, that we had back when he was 14. So anyway, it's kind of a side story, but just to watch these teens that we mentored through the years, not only in filmmaking, but in spiritual, that you can be a Christian and be in this industry.
Yes, wow.
And so that was important. But what I realized, I passed the baton on to Crosswind Productions to Nathan Blair, who is a wonderful mentor, teacher, filmmaker, and felt like it was time to pass the baton because God was calling me to Kentucky Infidel. Mm-hmm. And I realized much God was equipping me, that I would not have been ready at that time when I wrote it to actually be in a position to be able to produce it. So I just realized God's timing, and that so often God needs to equip us. He says who he calls, he equips.
Yes.
But that doesn't always happen overnight while we sleep. It happens when he takes us down and continues to use us. It doesn't mean that we're not being used during that time. It's that it's a stepping stone, using us in this area, and then goes on to use us. And so that has been God's preparation, God's use, God's plan all along. And so
he has to train us up, doesn't he?
He does have to train us up and strengthen our faith.
That's right.
Because for each one of these films, God's provision was just so amazing. And so when I approach this project that can be overwhelming in its size, and he had taught me that he's the one that provides. He's the one that equips.
That's right.
And I can only do it through his power, his provision, his protection, and those that he sends me,
So what are the next steps, Barbara, for the Kentucky Infidel? You said it's in development, but what does that mean exactly? What's next?
Development means basically finding the funding.
Okay.
And getting it ready, making sure your script is ready, beginning to collect your team, get your team who is really drawn to this project. Mm-hmm. And I have 2 producers, Chris Rogers and Paul Sermons, who are just amazing Christian filmmakers. and they have come alongside. And so you begin to put the team together. When you go into pre-production, that's when you start breaking down your script. You start looking at who you're going to need in the way of, production crew, looking for actors, looking for, beginning to put it together. Right. And so we're in that, raising funds. Mm-hmm. And so we really need God's provision for that. God to draw those people who He has gifted financially to come alongside. And
I believe He will do that. He's brought you this far.
Yes, He has. And so that trust level, and He needed to build my faith. He needed to build my skills. Mm-hmm. He needed to let me know I could trust Him.
Well, and He certainly is doing that. And I wish we had more time, Barbara, but our time is over. Where can people find you? Where can they find you?
Actually, they could go to Kentucky Infidel the movie.com.
Okay.
KentuckyInfidelthemovie.com.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Shaped by Faith, and I want to hear more as it progresses what's happening with Kentucky Infidel. But thank you so much, Barbara, for coming on.
Oh, thank you.
And
this has been such a privilege. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening. I'm Theresa Rowe. Everyone have a blessed day.
Thank you for listening to Shaped by Faith with Theresa Rowe. Remember to visit shapebyfaith.com to find out more about workouts, the TV show, podcasts, blogs, Shaped by Faith products, and much more.